26 years ago this week, on July 16th, 1995, WCW held its Bash at the Beach pay-per-view on an actual beach. Outdoors in Huntington Beach, California, with fans free to stop on by and watch the show at no charge. The old no gate, just like those Road Wild pay-per-views. No gate, just drive your motorcycle up. We're going to make $0 off the gate on these shows. Tony Schiavone tried to claim more than 100,000 people were in attendance, but you can shave a zero off of that and get a more accurate number. Maybe there were 10,000. I mean, look, I know all companies exaggerate, but that is just ridiculous. There's exaggeration, and then there's just whatever the hell this was. Before the main card began, we had a Hulk Hogan interview where he was interrupted by this giant man, Paul White, making his debut appearance, throwing a t-shirt at Hogan and asking him, "Remember this?" And Hogan looks at the shirt and he says, "That's Andre's." This was to set up the Giant being referred to as the son of Andre the Giant, which was quickly dropped. Randy Savage beat Ric Flair in a lifeguard lumberjack match, and Hulk Hogan beat Vader in a steel cage match in the main event using the escape the cage rule, which WCW did not traditionally use. That was a WWE thing. You escape the cage, both feet touch the floor. That's not how it used to work in the NWA and WCW. The cage was put around the ring to keep the people in, keep other people out, but you had pinfall and submission that usually counted in the cage. I know Jim Ross loves to talk about how much he hates that rule, escape the cage. It's almost like you're running away from your opponent. I grew up on the whole escape the cage thing because I was a WWF fan. So the blue bar cage, climbing out of the cage, I don't have as much of an issue with it. I mean, I can understand if you're a traditionalist, thinking that way and not liking that rule. But the only reason they did that rule here, so you might, well, then why'd they do it here in WCW if they didn't usually do that? Vader would not do a clean job for Hulk Hogan. The entire time they feuded, he would not do a clean job for him because he knew that Hogan was not going to do the same for him. So he said, "Fuck him. You're not jobbing me out." It ended up being Vader's final WCW pay-per-view match, because it was not long after this that Vader got into the backstage fight with Paul Orndorff that I mentioned earlier during my tribute to Orndorff, who just passed away. And he was gone from the company after that, and a few months later he was in WWE. 24 years ago this week, on the July 14th, 1997 episode of Raw is War, Mick Foley debuted his Dude Love character on TV as Steve Austin's mystery partner, beating Owen Hart and the British Bulldog to win the WWF Tag Team titles, which had been vacated after Shawn Michaels, who was champion with Austin, got into his little backstage scuffle weeks earlier with Bret Hart. 23 years ago this week, on July 12th, 1998, WCW presented its Bash at the Beach pay-per-view from San Diego, California, with over 500,000 homes tuned in, making it their most watched pay-per-view of the year. Unfortunately, it was also one of their worst, with Hollywood Hogan and Dennis Rodman beating Diamond Dallas Page and Karl Malone in the main event. This was days after Hogan lost the WCW World title to Goldberg on Nitro. Goldberg on this show defended his title successfully in 3 minutes against Curt Hennig. Squashed Hennig in a minute on Nitro the next night. Rodman and Malone had just played against each other in the NBA Finals, the Bulls against the Jazz. So it was great publicity for WCW, especially when the two of them got physical in Game 6, which led to Mr. Holier-than-Thou himself, Bob Costas, famously trashing pro wrestling on commentary after Rodman got called for his third flagrant foul during the game. Costas said he and Karl Malone, regrettably, are scheduled to wrestle in one of those bogus events next month. Why Malone wants to lower himself to that is anyone's guess, and Rodman apparently wants to start the wrestling now. That was Bob Costas. Malone was a pro wrestling fan from the days that his mom would take him and his siblings to the matches in Louisiana. Along the way, he had become friends with DDP. And DDP dreamt up this idea for a tag team match where it would be him and Malone against Hogan and Rodman. And he pitched it to Eric Bischoff, who he was, very friendly with. He was at Eric's house, and he pitched the idea to Eric. And Bischoff thought about it, and he went, wow, Hogan and Rodman against Savage and Malone. That's awesome. And DDP said, maybe you didn't hear me. Me and Malone. He said, because this is my connection, and I'm not giving it to anybody. He's my friend. So instead of Randy Savage, DDP got the, and good for him, by the way. I mean, he came up with the idea. He had the relationship with Malone. It should have been him. He was over enough to justify it. So he got the spot. Rodman was embarrassing here. He showed up in no condition to perform. He was in there screwing up spots left and right. At one point, he laid his head down on the turnbuckle and appeared to be taking a nap. Dean Malenko said Rodman is one of the only people in the history of the business to fall asleep during their match. I'm pretty sure Andre fell asleep during some of his matches too. $750,000 is what they paid this guy for all of this, plus whatever additional money he was owed. Karl Malone, he looked like he had actually trained and prepared and put time and effort into this. But a week before this, Rodman famously crashed a Pearl Jam concert with no shirt on, no shoes on. He was drinking from a bottle of wine. He jumped up on stage. He joined the band. And he stayed on stage with them for 45 minutes, singing along to various songs, or interrupting them is probably more accurate, until they finally got sick of him and they cut his mic off. Stone Gossard told him, get the fuck off the stage. Eddie Vedder said, well, I guess you've been drinking for 3 days straight. That tells you all you need to know about the state that Rodman was in for this show. Rodman in WCW was still a big deal, but his time there in 97, the first time he came in for a big program like this with the NWO, was much better than whatever they got from him in 98. Especially that Voodoo Child entrance he did with Hogan on Nitro that one time. Rodman filed suit against WCW that October, claiming he was not paid what he was promised on his contracts with the company. And that case was dismissed the following year. The next night, on the July 13th episode of Raw is War from the Continental Airlines Arena in East Rutherford, New Jersey, or the Meadowlands, as I still call it, Shawn Michaels made his first appearance on television since losing the WWF title to Steve Austin at WrestleMania. He did commentary for the show, including the opening match, which saw Undertaker nearly get his face burned off when he did the deal on the ring steps where he threw his arms up in the air to turn the lights back on in the arena. And Kane's pyro accidentally shot out of the same ring post he was standing in front of. That was very scary. Undertaker has had some bad experiences with the pyro guys over the years. Kane and Mankind also won the tag team titles from the New Age Outlaws, and Owen Hart ran down to the ring to beat the fuck out of Jason Sensation, who was doing a funny impersonation of him on commentary. Thankfully, Owen was a lot nicer to this Jason when I met him before the show. This was my very first live Raw experience. I had won luxury box seats from a local radio station, got to meet Mick Foley, Owen Hart, Mark Henry, Luna Vachon, who came into our box about an hour before Raw went live. They were taping something. While they were going from box to box, they were taping, I guess back then in 98, what would it have been? They still taping Shotgun? One of those syndicated shows they were taping. But they could not have been nicer. Mick, of course, looked like he had been in a car wreck, which is not surprising, given that he was only 2 weeks removed from the Hell in a Cell match against The Undertaker. But I am very glad I got to meet Owen and get a picture with him less than a year before his death. 19 years ago, this week on July 15th, 2002, hell froze over when Vince McMahon introduced Eric Bischoff as the new general manager of Monday Night Raw. There was a pitch to bring Bischoff in a year earlier, but it didn't work out. You really needed Bischoff to make the invasion work properly. You needed him and a handful of headliners from WCW. You didn't need all of them, but just some big names along with Eric. It would not have been difficult to come up with a proper invasion story using that cluster of people that could have made everybody a lot of money. But I guess they were not willing to take the risk. Some of those talents were that the money would be more than what they were making sitting on their ass at home working off their contracts with Turner. I'm not even saying I blame them for feeling that way if it's guaranteed money and you don't have to do anything for it. But that's what you needed to make that story work. The deal came together not long before he debuted, only a matter of weeks, really. To avoid any leaks, he even told Vince McMahon that he would fly himself in and book his own hotel because the minute his office books his airline ticket, he told Vince, everybody is going to know. And Vince said, "You're right." So that's what they did. He booked his own flight, he booked his own hotel, and he waited for word from them on when and where to be. This is what he said in his book, Controversy Creates Cash. The Raw I was going to appear on was at the Continental Airlines Arena in East Rutherford, New Jersey. Well, look at that. There you go. Another famous Raw from the Meadowlands. I came into New York City and stayed across the river near LaGuardia Airport. Monday morning, a town car came over and picked me up, bringing me to another hotel not far from the arena, but not the one where the wrestlers were staying. Around 2 or 3 in the afternoon, a script was slipped under my door. There were 2 or 3 pages of material they wanted me to memorize. Up until then, I had never had to memorize that much material. Usually, I'd work with bullet points and improve it. That's the way a lot of guys who have been in the business for a while work. I wasn't sure whether they wanted it word for word or not, but I figured if they spent this much time preparing this much script, I better do it word for word. For the next few hours, I walked back and forth in my room, talking to myself, reciting my lines. About 7 o'clock, a stretch limo arrived in my hotel to take me to the arena. We stayed out in the parking lot outside the venue until 9. Then the limo pulled inside the arena and I remained inside so no one could see me. And one of the things that I remember about watching this segment was the fact that they spoiled it. Going into the commercial. They were doing a backstage interview with Booker T, where I was coach and Booker looked over and he had the shocked look on his face. And they pan back and there's Eric Bischoff. And then he walks off camera and Booker goes, "Tell me I didn't just see that." And they went to commercial. Now they did it, I'm sure, because they wanted word to spread quickly. Holy shit, put USA on or whatever network they were on back then. I guess 2002 was probably still TNN. But they wanted people to know that Bischoff was going to be on the show and maybe they would pop a big number for it. But I thought that was incredibly stupid. It would have been more shocking if they didn't trot him out there right before Vince McMahon came out to make the announcement. But it was still one of the most shocking moments in Raw history. As Jerry Lawler said on commentary, he used to sit next to Vince McMahon on those Raw shows where he would wish death upon Bischoff. Probably when he would give away the Raw results on Nitro. I know that because it used to really piss me off. I can imagine how it must have made Vince McMahon feel. But out comes Vince McMahon to make the announcement. He goes from one son of a bitch to another. He introduces Eric Bischoff, who came out to AC/DC's Back in Black on the original broadcast. Every other version of it that you'll find, it's got his WWE music dubbed in. But they did use AC/DC on that first show. And Bischoff ended up working for them for a number of years. He was there for a good, 3 years, I think it was. It was later on in 2005 when they did the angle where he was literally thrown out into the trash. He was thrown into the back of a garbage truck on Raw, which was quite a way for his run there to end, but appropriate, I'd say, in some ways. But Bischoff was one of the best Raw GMs they had. As an on-air character, he was great in that role. And he ended up having a nice role for himself in the company.